Hey guys, I hope y'all can see this. It may. Oh, come on, son, you're right on top of Pawpaw. I told y'all I was going to tell y'all a story about hay. Well, it's hard to tell you about hay when you got a hay burner, a hay burner in your lap. But he's a good one. Kind of see I got some little kids around me, and I got my boy here. And I don't know how much of a story I'm going to be able to tell, folks. Seriously, I need to see these people. How much of a story I'm going to be able to tell with all this going on. No, you're on my leg. You're on my leg, son. Folks, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This guy, he's all over me. I don't know if it's love or attempted murder. I'm not for sure. Anyway, I want to tell you guys a story about hay. Another hay burner. My babies. You know, I told y'all the story about cornfields and picking corn and stuff, and that was dirt. That was dirt from kissing that little nasty mouth donkey. I looked at him, I thought I was getting more dark hair, but it was dirt. That over here is not dirt, so to stop making fun. Anyway, growing up, you know, we picked corn, and then at some point in there, my dad decided we would try hay, and I told y'all the story about the Bahia grass. Don't mess with that. That's part of my video. That's part of my video stuff. You guys just, I'm sorry, folks. Got part of my teaching aids out here, and they want to mess with it. Anyway, I'm gonna get back here real quick to this story. They love each other, those two. He's in here today because he got grounded. And I'll say it real fast why he's in here, why he's not listening. He goes down to the sanctuary just like little girl does. She's grounded too. And he goes down and picks on the donkeys and the animals. She goes down and goes in the feed room and kind of samples a little of this and a little of that, you know. So anyway, he just got to stay here for a while. He can't just keep going back and forth and getting in all kinds of trouble down there. But anyway, back to the hay story. My dad wanted to get away and not raise so much corn because it was so labor intensive. So he started experimenting every spring. He would go to the feed store and say, what kind of grass can I grow on that old sand hill down there that will produce a decent hay crop? And so he'd come home with some seed and would plant it. He'd make a seed bed, you know, plowing and disking and all that, would plant it. And sure enough, it would come up. But it never would survive the hot, dry summers. You know, it would grow for a while. And I'm trying to tell a story, son. No. You want to kiss it? Okay, good kiss. Good kiss. Good kiss. That's all. That's enough. Come on. I'll never get this story finished. It'll be in 10 parts. Be continued. Be continued. Anyway, and finally he hit on the Bahia grass. But in those meantime years, in those years in between there's several of them. And I told y'all every year he'd try to take a little bit of money that he could spare. He'd try to buy some type of equipment to upgrade a little bit of the stuff we had. We was poor folks as far as it come to farming. Now, my dad had a full-time job. It was at a refinery in Baytown. Didn't make a lot of money. It was steady. It was steady. But it wasn't a lot of money. And worked shift work. And 35 years, in fact, he works there until he retired. But every year he tried to buy some kind of a piece of equipment to make our farming a little bit better. And so he had bought a little, what they call a sickle mower. And this sickle mower, you pulled it behind your tractor, and it had like a little gearbox or transmission on it to where as the wheels would turn, it would make the little sickle blade go back and forth. And it was a kind of a two-man operation. There was a little seat, a little metal seat back there that one person was set up on it, being pulled around. That was before OSHA ever come along. They would have put up with that. And there was a handle, and you'd reach out that handle, and you'd pull that handle to you, and it'd raise that bar up if you had to turn around or back up or something like that. And then you lower it back down with that handle. But every time the wheel would turn, that little blade would go back and forth, and it's stuck out there about 4 foot. So you pull around the field, and you're cutting 4 foot at a time as you go. And that's not much cutting. But anyway, you got it done. And then we had a rake. The rake was kind of like a garden rake. You know how the garden rake has you kind of hook it and you drag it in the garden. Well, it was the same way. Same kind of thing. Ivan, stop playing. The same kind of deal, but you would, same kind of little seat, same kind of handle on it. You pull it with a tractor, and when you got where you was going, you drop those tines down. It was about 8 foot wide, and you drag it and you pull the hay across the cut grass, pull it to a place where you want to deposit it or drop it off, and you pull that handle, and those tines would raise up and you'd drop that 8 foot roll of, kind of like a roll of hay. And you'd pull like in a circle till you'd build up a mound. What you did, you're building up a mound of hay. Then you would come, before we had hay balers, you would come with your trailer, pull up beside that, and then we were looking at hang on. Once you got your hay in that roll or pile of hay, and you have these piles all over your field, because you just keep raking it in these circles and making these mounds of hay. It's loose hay, like right here. It used to be like loose hay, you know. Okay, then the mechanical part is over. There's no more riding a mower or a rake once that's done. Then it becomes physical. You pull your trailer or wagon, we had that old wagon we used for corn, up beside that pile of hay, and you take these, it's called a pitchfork. You may have seen pictures of the devil with these, and this one is one of them that we used. Probably the only survivor. We had several of them, and this is what they call a five tine. I think they call them tines, these things here. I think they're called tines. But this thing is older than I am. It's no telling how many handles this thing has had in it over the years. This handle here is in bad shape. But then you start pitchforking. This is called a pitchfork. And you start scooping this hay up in this pitchfork and throwing it over into that trailer or wagon. And once you get it up pretty high, my dad put us kids up on top to kind of hold it down, keep it from bouncing off as we went toward the barn. And then it gets worse. It gets worse. You was out there probably piling that hay on that, and there were several people with pitchforks from both sides of the wagon. They'd probably pull up there if you could. Sometimes my dad even pull up on top of the mound and load from both sides, sometimes from one side, and then just kind of go around the circle even. Because the mounds would be pretty good size. They would be maybe, 10 or 12 foot, 20 foot across, but they might be 4 or 5 foot high. Pretty good mound of hay. It would take several wagon loads to get that that mound moved to the barn. And if the weather was unsettled, my dad would only rake up enough that he knew he'd get in that day. He didn't want a bunch of mounds out there and get rained on, because mounds of hay don't dry out very well. You know, you end up out there and have to bust them all out again trying to get it to dry. Grass that's been cut and it's laying on the field flat, it'll dry in a day or so, you know, if you get some good hot sun on it, especially a wind, and wind and sun. But we get to the barn, my dad had a loft, and I've told you a little bit of our barn. It was a loft in it, and the roof sloped back, and in the back far recesses, it got low. The roof was very low, and that's where us kids come in. My dad would pitchfork it off that trailer into that big door in the loft. He'd pitchfork it in there. My mom would have a pitchfork, and she'd throw it further back. My brother would throw it further back, and then I was back in that little recesses where it's kind of short, and I'd be packing those little recesses full of hay with my pitchfork. None of us ever got hurt doing it, but you're back in there, it's hot, it's dusty, and we'd take breaks and we'd come outside and get a fresh air. And my dad had the hardest job. Even though he was out in the fresh air, he had the hardest job. He was having to scoop it up and throw it up over his head into that loft door. Our hardest part, I guess, was the heat and the dust. But that's the way we did our hay. Now, later on, my dad and my uncle, Cuz, the one that does the bowls, they bought what they called a stationary baler, a hay baler. And it's hard to describe this monster. It was huge. You hay the same way as cutting it and dragging it to these little piles, but you pull that baler up beside them. And tractors back then didn't have the PTOs. They had like a little roller on them. Same operation as a PTO, used on the side of the motor. And this equipment they made that used runoff for this kind of stuff would have also a little roller. They put these wide belts from one roller to the other, big long belts. And you had to line it up perfect, or your belt would run off one side or the other. And then you'd turn your tractor on, block the tire so it couldn't roll, block the baler's tire so it couldn't roll, because if it rolled to each other, they'd slacken the belt, its belt fly off. Again, OSHA never showed up. And you would pitchfork this hay over into the top of it, And my mom and my aunt, you would have to have two people tying these bales together, and they would come down through this chute after this big plunger, as they throwing it in with pitchforks. This big plunger would push it on down, and it had big blades down there cutting it into what they call blocks of hay. And there's another plunger that all worked in tandem with each other, would be pushing these blocks out through this, like this tunnel in a sense, a square tube. And at a point in this tube, there would be slots that they could stick this baling wire through and stick it back through the other side on the length of the bale they wanted. And one on the other side would take pliers and wrap that wire. And when that bale come out the end, it would kind of expand because it's pushed down tight in that tube. And it comes out the end, it would expand, and that would make the wires tight. And then there had to be someone there to stack this hay. And it was very labor intensive, and those bales were heavy. And then at the end of the day, you would come around with your trailer or your wagon, whatever you use. We always used an old wagon. There's a difference. This wagon had a tongue in it. It had a tongue that would pull, kind of like the old Western wagons, I guess, had a tongue that would swivel and make the front tires swivel too. And we'd stack our hay on that and pull it to the barn, and then my dad would have to throw it up in that loft. And we had a tool to help move that hay around, called a hay hook. This is a hay hook. And this one too is probably as old as I am. Got a handle on it. You grip it like so, and you slap it in that bale, and you can drag it bale. If you got two of these, you can slap them in each end and pick the bale up. But most time we had one and we just drag it to where we had to stack it. Then if we could, we'd stack it with one, or if we had two, we could stack it easier. But this is called a hay hook, and these things are old. They've been around a long time, seen many a bale of hay. Later on, several years later on, my dad was able to get a square baler similar to what you see today. Run off a PTO shaft on your tractors, and and it's a one-man operation. You get a different kind of rake, I love you, buddy boy. Don't shove me out of my chair. You don't get in my lap either. You almost broke my knees off a while ago. Anyway, you make me lose my train of thought. A different kind of rake. You still use the same cutter if you wanted to, but a different kind of rake where you rake the hay in long rows, just long rows. You didn't bring it. Yeah. It gets right up on my lap. You're not a baby. You're not a baby no more. And these long rows, and then the balers kind of comes down those long rows and eats that hay up, ties it all automatically with strings, and kicks it out the back end. And then you come along with your wagon or trailer, whatever you got, you pick those up, and again, we still use these. And they work great. They do. They seriously do. And I've saved most all the stuff my dad gave me, left to me when he retired from all this kind of stuff, and because he knew I'd hang on to it. And hopefully I can pass it on to my kids, and hopefully they'll hang on to this stuff and not throw it all in the trash. I don't know. But anyway, that was our hay baling experiences. And now, as you see behind me, is a roll of hay. Now, this has been eat on for several days, but that's the easiest. If you got a tractor that can handle it, round bales are the way to go. Especially if like Lester has down at Sickle, where he can put his inside out of the weather, but they're made, you can leave them in the weather. And the rain does not soak into them, it runs off the top. They're tight, they're for tight. And the rain falls and just runs off the edges. Now the bottoms though, the bottoms will have some rot. It'll rot where it's touching the ground. A lot of people put them up on boards and won't have that rot, or even on a rock pile. You put out rock and stack them on, and the water can seep off. But if they're sitting on the ground like mine do, you're gonna have a little bit of rot at the bottom. But the cows will eat every other bite of it, and it's good hay. And if they're tight. If round bales that are loose, they'll soak up water like a sponge almost, and they ain't gonna be no good. So anyway, that's the story about our hay baling, hay harvest. And guys, I don't know about this guy. I don't know about Heidi, what you thinking, baby? What y'all thinking? Little Sophie and little Ivan both have been grounded because of their exploits. And so I'm gonna leave y'all with this story. I hope you enjoy it. It was a lot of work, but it was a family affair, and my mom right in there with my dad and all of us kids. There was some type of job that all of us could do, no matter how big we was or how little we was. There was something we could do to help out. My sister used to pack water to us, constantly bringing water back and forth from the house to the barn. That was a good job. That was a good job. All right. Heidi and I, and these guys are going to call it a day. I'll get this guys out to y'all. You may get this after Thanksgiving, but I wish you a happy Thanksgiving. I do. I love you guys. Y'all take care. This is Pawpaw.